Hi, this is Kathy Davis. Welcome to the September 9th, 2021 Inspiring Authors Lunch and Learn. Today, we'll be speaking with Krystal Weigl on literature and law, and I'll get to your introduction here shortly. I first want to remind everybody that of a few logistics. The call is being recorded. You'll receive a link to the YouTube video within about 48 hours after the call. Your attendance at these meetings serves as your permission to be seen in the recordings. If you don't want to be seen, feel free to take your, what do you do? Click your video off. That's what that thing's called. Please mute yourself on your end so to avoid any background noise. Find your chat button down at the bottom usually. Got a couple more people coming in to join us. And if you have any questions throughout today, please type them into the chat box and we'll be sure we get your questions answered. Our theme for 2021 continues to be inspiring authors. And each month we welcome guests who are either an inspiring author or someone who helps inspire authors by sharing knowledge, new ideas, opportunities, and wisdom. Krystal just happens to be both. Welcome, Krystal. Krystal is an attorney here in St. Louis who focuses her practice on making legal accessible. She advises small business owners, works for the injured, and counsels clients on how the law can best meet their needs. Her spare time is filled with her role as board member for the Susan G. Komen Foundation of Missouri, volunteering with the Women's Foundation of Greater St. Louis, her lawyer well-being initiative, and her women's literature manuscripts. I need to talk about that sometime. She enjoys running, golfing, and all things St. Louis. Welcome, Krystal. Yay.
Hi, everyone.
Applause, applause.
Thursday. Happy September.
Some of you may know Krystal, yeah, from being in our anthologies. But I want to jump right in here. Your topic is literature and law. I know you were in Grit, correct?
Living my
Not
truth.
Grit, living my truth with, I thought Ruth Bader Ginsburg in my head and somehow I said Grit. Living My Truth, one of our anthologies, tribute to Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And our perspective today is from your legal side of your brain rather than your author side of your brain. As an author, what's the first inclination that you usually see when an author starts thinking, maybe I need to talk with an attorney?
Because maybe I need to talk to an attorney comes in every shade and color of the spectrum. It usually pops up when they go, oh, I heard someone else had a problem with this, or I read about this online. I don't want to have that problem, so I need to chat with an attorney.
I know some of the instances that have kind of come across my desk have been, if someone mentions a name of a living person, can you talk a little bit about that? How would you answer that question? Yeah.
Okay, so I basically had three separate categories of things we want to protect, right? And this goes directly to what you're talking about, because when we think about, do we want to talk to a lawyer? It's because we want to protect something. When the law does what it's supposed to protect us.
Mm-hmm.
So the third category that I think is really, really important is to protect what you've created. Everything that's in that book is a creation of yours. Whether it's actually something you've experienced in real life, whether it's a memoir, you're writing it down, you're putting the words to it, the music, everything like that is your creation. So when we talk about, okay, we're gonna potentially discuss another person or something that affects another person in our writing, we want to be careful that we're not doing it in a way that is either untrue or in a way that's going to harm their reputation. So we're almost always looking at defamation. When you speak defamatory words, that's slander. When you write it down, it's libel. So when we're talking about something that we want to include in our book, we just want to be careful that we're not writing down lies about a real life person in a real life way that can harm their reputation. Now, to take that a step further, when we're talking about harming them, their reputation, we're talking about costing them money. So don't write down lies about someone else that might be true, or could be viewed as being true, like they're believable lies, that then cost another person money, and you won't be in defamatory territory.
No, that's great advice.
Yeah, thanks. Number one time this pops up is when we accuse someone of a crime. So we've seen a lot of defamation lawsuits come out in stories following the Me Too movement. This happens all the time, but I think that that's the one that people can really, it really resonates with people because we see it all the time, and it got a ton of publicity. Like nobody knew that anyone was being harassed at work until that came out. I don't know what that's about, but you know, no huge shock here personally, but once it came out, it got a ton of attention. It had a lot of celebrities backing it. There was a lot of chat about it. So the men that were involved wanted to say those things were all lies. And so defamation lawsuits got a lot of traction.
Definitely. Sometimes when people are writing, what I've noticed when people are writing stories or recanting an event in their lives or their history, they want to tell the story from their perspective and what they believe is true to be true. And sometimes we have to help them tone down that copy a little bit, and so that we don't end up having to have a lawyer review the copy. We've had a couple instances where we have had a lawyer review the copy because I just got a little concerned about some of what was being said. And we do that as a protection mechanism. So someone's asking a couple things. They want to make sure that if you could raise your voice a little bit, some of them are having a hard time hearing you.
Sure.
And I hate these little pop-up updates. Go away. And then someone is asking about if they used a fictitious name, does it change your liability? If they don't use their real name, I'm guessing as the author, and are using a fictitious name, does it change the liability?
Okay. So I'll try to talk a little louder. If you guys can't hear me, just give me like a, I don't know, gesture at me. I can see everyone. Okay, got it, Joanne. I'll try to be a little louder there. So couple questions in there that I want to address separately. One, how do we tweak things so that we can say our truth without being defamatory, right? Because truth is always in the eyes of the writer. That's our perception. That's what we experienced, and we don't necessarily have to. There's not an absolute truth. So when I say don't write down lies, what I mean is really don't write down blanket untruth statements that you're trying to say really happened. Okay. Now, most people don't do that. So that's a pretty easy box to check. But what we do instead is we say, look, here's how I experienced this. This is what happened to me. And here are some things that surrounded that circumstance that I think are important. And that's where the lies come in, right? That's where the parts about, is this absolute truth? The answer is almost always no. So we get into this weird territory where we go, what's the balance there? How do I explain my mother's behavior in the 80s in a way that's still going to be okay at Christmas time, right? And the answer is that it totally depends on what you're writing and who you're writing about. If you use a fictitious name, it helps, but it doesn't totally take away the problem. In order for someone to hold you accountable for defamation, it has to actually harm their reputation. It has to cause them harm. And almost always that means that it has to lose them money. Okay. So in order to do that, if we change all the names in the story, if we make this story set in a different time period, if we're changing some of the geographic location, any of these details can make it harder for the general public to recognize the person who's going to be upset.
Mhm.
If you're saying, look, here's this person's name, here's their address, here's their relationship to me, here's how they behaved at this time, now we're on a pretty far end of the spectrum where they're recognizable to the general public. What you don't have to worry about is telling a story in a way that says this is a real person and this real person really did something bad. That's not that's not defamation. The bad thing has to be something that's going to cost them money. It has to be someone that the general public is going to recognize, and you have to do it in a way that is going to be seen by the courts as untrue. Now, if that all sounds super confusing, it's because it is. So these high profile cases go to court all the time, and the judges don't know what to do with them, and they rely on the attorneys to make the arguments. And then we say a bunch of stuff like this, and they give us a new answer. So the answer is ask an attorney if you're writing about a real person who's probably going to be really upset by what you say.
We've had a couple authors who will include someone's name in their book, and it has nothing to do with defamation. They're just mentioning someone's name. And I typically say, if you're going to mention someone's name, even if it's a compliment, that it's protocol or courtesy to let that person know through email or through a letter that you're mentioning them in your book. Occasionally, we'll have that person who's being named say, one, they'll say thank you. Two, they may ask for a copy of the section that mentions their name. And have you encountered incidences like that? And how have you advised in those instances?
Yeah. So it's not always because we're saying something bad, right? When we're saying something bad, we're talking about defamation. But when we're using someone else's name or their likeness, which means like their personality, how they look, their identity as a person is now becoming part of our story, then we're talking about appropriation. So everyone under the law is entitled to make money off of their own likeness. Our likeness can be how we look, it can be our personality, it can be the role that we play as a unique individual. But when someone else takes that without our permission and they make money off of it, then we're crossing a few lines that the law means to protect us from. So if you're the best advice is what Kathy just said, give them a heads up. Say, hey, just wanted to let you know, and do it in writing. A phone call is not a great idea. Just send them an email. If they want to review it, then they want to review it. But when they respond to you, then you're going to know, am I going to have a problem here? One of the best things that you can do when you're looking for problems is just ask the people that are involved.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't have to ask them, hey, are you going to cause a problem with this? But definitely ask them, or I guess notify them, hey, I'm going to use this information. Just wanted to let you know. And you'll get a temperature of this is okay, this is not okay, or we're somewhere in between, and I should watch out for that before I make money off of this.
So we have a couple questions that have come in. The first is, what about a statement like, I got this recipe from Martha Stewart?
Well, is there more context for that? Because that could go a bunch of different ways.
So Karen, let me unmute. Or if you want to unmute yourself.
Sure. Yeah, in a work of fiction, in a story, and the lady says, I made a great cake for my daughter and I got the recipe out of Martha Stewart.
Yeah, so gray area, definitely gray area. Can you say it? Yeah. Is Martha Stewart going to come after you for saying that? Unlikely, but definitely possible. Easy way to think about this is if we use song lyrics, which aren't our own creation in our book. You'll see this all the time when you do it quickly through a digital platform like Facebook. Your video will be taken down. The reason it's taken down or it's muted is because it's copyright infringement. So when we're using someone else's name, if it's a really well-known person and they're really well known for putting recipes out there like Martha Stewart is, it's pretty unlikely that you're going to cause them any damage by using that name, but they still have a right to sue if they want to. So it's one of those things. The only way to completely avoid getting in trouble for putting something out into commerce is to not put anything into commerce. So we're always looking at it from a risk spectrum.
So Deb Weltman, you want to ask your question, please?
The one I just typed in?
Yes.
Okay, so what if you have a circumstance where you're just talking about somebody by their first name only, and you're using accurate historical time frame, like, you know, this is when I talked to this person, this is where we were, but you're only using their first name?
Are we talking about defamation issues here?
No.
Are we talking okay, so are you concerned about using that person, like appropriating that person's personality?
Well, it could be, because I am talking about, you know, experiences we had together, and not anything defaming, but just, you know, kind of a joke somebody said.
Factual, yeah.
Factual.
Yeah, sure. So give them a heads up, like practical standpoint, it helps to let them know. Legal standpoint could go either way, but if you're mentioning someone that you know in a memoir context, factual, it's not harmful to them, that's a pretty safe way to include someone.
Thank you.
And using first names is fine too, because remember, in order to get in any kind of trouble, the general public has to be able to recognize that person. So the people that are around them, the people that work with them, people who know them can read it and go, oh, I know exactly who that is. And this is, this is going to cost that person money on top of it. So pretty safe way to go about it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Great information. So Barry's asking, if I use a pseudonym in a memoir and I put a disclaimer in the beginning that says anyone named in the book is under a pseudonym, does that protect me?
Interestingly enough, I was just going to mention the use of disclaimers. They can be really, really helpful. And I would be amiss as an attorney not to tell you to throw a disclaimer in there if you're concerned about any of these things. They are helpful. Does it protect you if you use a pseudonym? It protects you to the extent that people would not recognize that person. So if you use their first, and the more information that you give about a real person, the more likely it is that their friends and family will recognize them. And remember, that's only one of the prongs, right? So just writing about a recognizable person doesn't get you in trouble, but you have to write about a recognizable person to get in trouble with that real person.
I know we had an author a few years ago who happened to have been an attorney, but she was also teaching at one of the universities. And she was giving real life scenarios of incidences that had happened and describing the person. And we went back in and we changed the name. We changed, if they were male, we perhaps made them female, or if they were a tennis player, we made them a golfer. And so we really tried to hide so that someone couldn't say, oh, that's me. I know she's talking about me, because her students were going to buy the book more than likely. So when we were working with her, she made certain that there was no way anybody was going to figure out who she was talking about.
Yeah, and that's super helpful. I think where people struggle with it the most is whenever they're talking about memoir situations and they're going, well, this is my real life that I'm really writing about. But remember, there's a lot to it beyond just writing about someone that other people know.
Mm-hmm.
Krystal, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, go ahead, Barry.
Okay, thanks, Kathy. So this is a memoir, and it's people it's not made up. This is actual factual incidents and conversations. And in one case, it's an email that I've reproduced. And in all the cases, there's like, I don't know, 50 of them. In all the cases, I've assigned them a pseudonym, first name only, pseudonym. So, and I figured if I put a disclaimer in the beginning saying all of the people mentioned in this book are listed under a pseudonym, if anyone is stupid enough to try to take legal action against me, they're going to be outing themselves and their case will be null and void, something like that. I obviously it would be more professionally worded than that. And if there's any like templated language that you could recommend or somewhere to find that. So that's the situation. I really don't want to I don't want to alter the details like Kathy just suggested, because the juice is in the details. I want the details to be there as they actually happened, as the conversations happened, and so on. So I really don't want to alter the details or the genders. Those are both very important.
Sure. Yeah, understandable. And that's common, right? When we're writing about our real stories, that's what really makes them interesting.
Yeah. So
none of that stuff is ironclad. None of it's bulletproof. So I think that's the important part. I don't want to repeat too much of what I've said because I know it gets uninteresting, but do keep in mind, if you're writing about real people that are really recognizable and the truth is subjective or open to interpretation, then you need to look at whether or not you're about to cost them money by publishing these stories. So is it likely that it's going to harm their reputation? Is it likely that they had a right to make money off of their unique role in the story?
Off of their what?
Their unique role in the story. Is it likely that sharing these stories in a way that makes you money is depriving them of money? So those are the times when people bring lawsuits.
Yeah, I don't think that would be an issue. It would be more like if they got offended or embarrassed or exposed, and
Yeah.
if they feel like that, it's more a question of that.
Sure. And the law doesn't offer a lot of protection for embarrassment, right? So our court system is based on money. So when you're talking about making money by sharing other people's stories, that's your main concern.
Yeah.
Is there any templated language that you can refer me to for a good disclaimer?
There's not, but I would suggest Googling, Google some books where the lawsuits have taken place, where people have gone after those authors, and look at the disclaimers they used. So
Okay,
sometimes disclaimers are funny, sometimes they are crafted by other authors, and sometimes they're crafted by lawyers. They serve different purposes. Sometimes they make the book more interesting because it's like an advertisement, like, hey, you're about to read a whole bunch of really gossipy stuff and it's going to get ugly. And so that can be a fun marketing bonus. And when it's written by a lawyer, usually it's not so interesting. So,
Right.
Yeah, there's not a template because every single one of these situations is completely different.
Great. Thank you. I'm going to move on to another quick question here. Karen, I kind of had to chuckle on this one. Is there a time limit on mentioning a person, something that happened 50 years ago?
There's not a statute of limitations on this one. If it causes them harm today, that's the standard, not when the actual incident took place. And another way to think about it is the time, if there is any, starts when the story gets out. So if you're causing them harm by writing a book, then your book is kind of the beginning of that timeline.
Well, and I think part of this question may be, even if that person is dead.
Yeah. So believe it or not, estates still have rights. children of deceased people have rights. Spouses who are still here. So that the timing isn't nearly as important as what's the risk, what's the damage that I might be creating for this person.
So Karen, if you like, we can always go back and change that name if you like. Oh,
Yeah,
we-
your story doesn't lose a lot of impact when you change names. I'll tell you that. That's one of the easiest. It's one of the easiest ways to go about it, right? And these lawsuits, you know, I know it can be a little overwhelming because it's like you can get sued for this, you can get sued for that, you can get sued for this. Every time you get in your car, your chance of being involved in some kind of lawsuit is really high. It's extraordinarily high. We have like really dangerous highways here. So just keep in mind, you know, you're analyzing risk. You're not finding more reasons to not publish your story.
So Barry had an additional question. If he publishes with a publisher as opposed to self-publishing, the publisher will use their own legal department to advise me on the risk, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And publishers got to cover themselves too.
Yeah.
Another thing you want to keep in mind is get your business entities set up, right? You need an LLC of some kind. It doesn't really matter what it is, but you want to have an entity to protect the asset and the creations that you're doing separate from everything else you've already accomplished and created and protected in life.
I know one of the other questions that we had come in before we got on today was, what is the difference in terms of authorship between copyright and trademark?
Okay, that's a fun one. Trademarks are for slogans. They're for logos. They're for words, like sets of 1 or 2 words. They can be for titles. Some people trademark their names. Copyrights are anything that you fix in something tangible. If I take a picture, if I make a recording now, it is copyrighted. The copyright belongs to Kathy and Davis Publishing. So anytime that I solidify something in a tangible medium, it's copyrighted. Once you handwrite something down on a piece of paper, you've got copyright protection there. The difference in how you go about suing for infringement of those things, how much you can sue for, when, how you register those things are pretty infinite. So as far as like what we're doing with this stuff, the book that you create is copyrighted and you have copyright protection in your words, which is one of the reasons I always tell people not to worry about like sharing it with beta readers, sharing it with people who might be working with you to publish or an editor. You already have that copyright protection. Trademarks, you want to register with the USPTO.
One of the questions we get a lot, and I just saw it pop up, what are the legal concerns with using quotes and using song lyrics?
Copyright infringement. If you don't own the lyrics, you can't use it. So it's a copyright violation. The damages for violating copyrights are statutory, meaning that the law says they are X amount for every violation. So you can't say that you didn't know they were copyrighted. You can't say that you accidentally copyrighted them. Those damages are automatic. So you don't want to be doing that.
So Barry has a question. Who is better to copyright with, the Copyright Office? And I've never heard of this Writers Guild West.
That's just a third party that would go to the USPTO on your behalf. So you can pretty easily register your own work for copyright. But again, you do not have to register your work to have copyright protection.
And Barry, we have a one sheet that has the Copyright Office information on it and how to copyright your work. So I'll share that with you.
Oh, good, thank you. And then I had a follow-up question for Krystal about the previous question about song lyrics and quotes and stuff. is it a problem? What about if you cite the source? Doesn't that give you dispensation if you cite the source? Like if I wanted to do I've seen in a lot of books where they'll use like for an epigram, or at the beginning of a chapter, they'll quote a quotation in like italics or quotation marks, and then they'll put a dash and Susan Sontag, or James Earl Jones, or whoever.
It's not so much about citing the source, it's about not taking those lyrics and making them part of your own. So it's kind of a nuanced difference. You can say what a song title is, you can say who the author is, things like that, because those are facts. Those aren't, you're not taking the lyrics and saying that it's now part of your story.
Right. So a lot of times I like to use as an epigram in the front of the book a real pithy quote, and then I always cite the source. Is that okay?
It's not about citing the source, I think, is the only distinction I want to make. You can use quotes, but not just because the source is cited. So lots of books do have a chapter and then a quote, and then they put the person's name there. They're repeating what the words are, what the fact is of the statement. So because you're attributing it to a specific person isn't necessarily the all clear, but it's not a copyright infringement automatically.
Thank you.
There's another source that I've mentioned more than once, and I'll make sure that we include the link to this blog. There's a blogger, her name is Jane Friedman. She used to work for, I think, Houghton Mifflin or Macmillan, one of the big publishers. And she has a blog now in supporting writers. She has one of her blogs is a couple years old. It's on trademarks and permissions. And because one of the questions we get a lot, well, if I only use 6 words of the song, is that okay? Or 12 words. And it's like, okay, go read this blog and it'll explain it a little bit in more detail. So I'll make sure we include that link to this specific blog also when we do the follow-up email. She's a great resource for that kind of stuff, because she's sharing information that she learned while she was in, the major publishing industry from a writer's perspective.
Yeah.
Again, she also claims not to be the official legal perspective, but it is still good information. We've got fantastic questions coming.
And I just want to say, keep in mind that like the reason that restaurants couldn't sing happy birthday and they had to do all those weird like hokey like clappy things that made everyone uncomfortable was because happy birthday was copyrighted, right? So copyrights expire after a certain amount of time, but if you're making money off of something that someone else created, you can get in trouble for copyright infringement. So thank you, Applebee's, for all of those terrifying moments when we were just trying to eat quick.
There was an old I don't remember the name of the chain. It Mexican food. I think there used to be a restaurant in Crestwood Mall, and I don't remember what it was, where they bring the hat and they dance around you, and just like, whoa, what is all this?
No.
Yeah, it's like, please don't tell them it's my birthday. Yeah.
Yes.
So, are there resources for people who may not be able to afford an attorney's opinion right now?
Yep. There are lots of them. There's a site that I like that's called the Book Designer. They can be pretty useful. And the other thing is, I struggle all the time with, how do you help people figure out where their protections are without also eating up all of the available funds that they have to get their stuff out there. So open to suggestions if anybody's got them, but yeah, it's tough, right? Because the law is supposed to protect you. You're supposed to understand what it is. It punishes you if you don't understand it, but you do still have to pay to get access to it. So that is a weird, screwy, messed up thing that we shouldn't always have in our system, and we always do. And it's like the only reason I'm still practicing law, a little personal note, is just because I'm really spiteful about that. But, I work with Kathy often. I love love the company. I love what Davis Creative does. I am available for questions on this stuff. I can't do everything for free because I still have to pay my mortgage, but I'm here, I can help. And usually there is a practical way to approach this stuff without throwing thousands of dollars at one of the larger law firms around here.
Right. And I know at least one person on this call has used the services of the VLAA, the Volunteer Lawyers and Accountants for the Arts. And it may take a while to get a response back, but that is another good group here in St. Louis that I know has helped more than one of our authors. And yes, definitely, we will make sure that you get information on how to contact Krystal.
There are some, I'm blanking on the names, but there are some creative organizations here in St. Louis that do have access to volunteer attorneys. I know Grace Hill Women's Business Center is usually pretty good for businesses that are getting started, and they have counsel available. That's the one that comes to mind right away, but there are others.
Yeah. So I just want to make sure that if there's any other questions that anybody wants to have us specifically direct, get them in the chat box now. We're going to start rounding down our talk here. I know I've learned a lot. I always learn something new when I talk with Krystal. One of the great things that Krystal is going to offer, and you mentioned it to me earlier, if someone does have a question, you're offering a 30-minute free consultation.
Yeah. You should always be able to have a consultation for free. It's the figuring out what needs to be done and how to best go about it. That's part of the business of running a law practice, right? So it's always helpful to ask a couple different attorneys, and if you get 20 different answers from 3 different attorneys, don't be too surprised.
I almost skipped over this and didn't mean to slight you in the least little bit, Kay. Does it make a difference if quotes are widespread, such as a quote from Oprah or Marianne Williamson or Brene Brown? I see that a lot also. They show up on greeting cards. Does that constitute copyright infringement?
Yes, it does. It does make it can make a difference, but there's 2 really important things there. One, damages for copyright infringement are set in law. So they are thousands of dollars for every incident of copyright infringement. When you see this stuff on greetings card, it's because there's a license agreement with Brene Brown. It's not because Hallmark just decided that they didn't care about the USPTO anymore. So even when you see these quotes in the beginnings of chapters, there's usually a license agreement in place, especially if you see something come out of like Penguin or Random House. They're not using that stuff because they don't care about the damages. Copyright infringement damages are automatic. There's no ones whatsoever, and they're very expensive. So if you're thinking to yourself, I don't have a lot of money to talk to an attorney right now, so I'm just going to give it a go, you're going to spend a lot of money for copyright infringement, and that's probably not where you want to see this project go.
Well, and if you multiply that, if you print 100 books, that's 100 times that thing is printed. If you print 500 books, yeah. So
it's not per book. It's not per, it is per incident. So every time that you make money off of someone else's work, and work can be a photo, it can be a drawing, it can be a depiction of any kind. It doesn't just have to be words. That's an incident of copyright infringement.
Yeah, no, that's great information. Krystal, you are a wealth of information. I greatly appreciate you being here today.
Well, thank you very much. I'm more than happy to answer questions offline. I will do it through email because only so many hours in a day. But thank you guys for listening. I know this stuff can be kind of dry, but I always available to figure out how to make it more accessible because it's important.
One more quick question. This is a great question. What about citing Bible passages? Are those copyrighted?
Tough question. You can get in trouble for it. Yes.
That's when God sues you.
That's when God comes after you. Yes, he's a capitalist. I don't know if you knew. But yeah, one last thing I'll say on this copyright stuff here, because it's been brought up so much, and obviously, you know, applies to a lot of what you guys are working on. Copyright protections it's not a new thing. It's actually like a really, really lengthy history. And it's interesting to those of us that have a lot of spare time and do way too much of this work. It's written in the US Constitution. It's Article 1, Section 8, Clause 8 is the copyright clause. So it protects authors in their writings directly in the US Constitution. That's how important, that's how sacred, that is how ingrained in our personal history that copyright protections are. So it's not something to mess around with. It is important, but it should not be a reason why you wait another decade or so to get your story out there. It's super manageable. Just do it in a smart way and ask for help if you don't know what you're doing.
So with regards to Bible passages, I know there are, and I don't remember which one, but you can go online to this and go to the specific Bible, like it's, what is it, the New English Version or whatever. I'm not that biblical to remember, but they quite often will cite their requirements on the website. And there are times when we have pulled those requirements right off of the disclaimer that they want us to use on the copyright page. We've pulled that directly off of their website and included that in a book where we've had Bible quotes specifically from that version. Most of them are pretty liberal as long as you follow their guidelines for usage. Is what we have found.
It's super helpful. And like I said, just it's so fact specific, right? It depends where you're getting your information from. But if somebody wrote it down before you wrote it down, that's when you should go, okay, I need to look into this.
Yeah. No, that's great. And we'll get to see Krystal again on September 30th. You'll be back. We'll be interviewing Krystal from her perspective as an author herself. And so we'll love to have you join us for that. Karen Shalusky. Karen, can you raise your hand and wave at everybody? Karen will be with us on September 23rd. So we're doing lots of author insights and author spotlights to let everybody get to know some of our authors also. So hopefully you can join us for those. And in October on the 14th, we have Tom Ruwich. He's a marketing and branding person, and we'll be talking about storytelling. So we're spacing them out here every couple of weeks for you. I greatly appreciate you being with us. Thank you, Krystal, for all your information today. There will be a follow-up email that'll come out sometime within the next 48 hours, but we are on a Thursday, so it might be Monday. Just bear with us and we'll make sure everybody gets the information. Thanks, everybody.
Cool. Thanks, everyone.
Can we get your electronic signature or your electronic autograph, Krystal?
Yeah.
Probably not.
Damn. And are you related to Katherine Heigl?
I am not related to Miss Heigl, as
Okay.
far as I know.
All right.
but
My
she does have a good
eyes are
spelling.
getting bad.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, everyone. Appreciate your time.
Bye-bye.